What's going on?
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood and my tongue keeps bleeding. From the words I spit, so sharp, so freezing. So cold, behold, frostbite they feeling. I could tear you apart or I could go heal them. Don't believe in fate, don't believe in ceilings. I just need a taste and my mind starts feeling. I don't pace myself, I grind on kneeling. Got lust for change, I just love the feeling. I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. And I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. Cause I'ma live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I don't lie at night, I be in my feelings. I'ma be fine, need time, and I'll still be winning. I live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I don't lie at night, I be in my feelings. I'ma be fine, need time, and I'll still be winning. I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon.
We are live now. Paste. Next. Post. So I put that on Facebook for anybody who missed it. Good evening, everybody. What's going on? Welcome to Dead Air Live on the Dead Air Full Spectrum channel. It is our Sunday night show for the next 2 hours. Incredible topics and guests in and around the paranormal field. And with me, as always, Mr. Ken DaCosta. Is that a green screen? Because that's a really realistic background in your office right there.
If this is a green screen, then I've got bigger problems. No, actually, excuse me, I am in Coventry, Rhode Island right now, coming to you live from the Paint House Museum.
On location.
On location. So tonight, a couple of good friends of ours are doing an investigation of the location, and we'll have them pop in from time to time and give you updates as far as what's going on here. But we have Melissa St. Hilaire and Cheryl Plum, who are in the next room. There you go. There they are.
In the spooky shadows.
Didn't realize we were going live so soon.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what's going on. They are going to be left to their own devices tonight. I'm going to be with you here. There is a chance that I might pop out if I have to go rescue any of them, but I don't think that's going to be necessary tonight because they are fearless investigators. It's their first time here. We are very, very happy to host them tonight, all the way from the left coast. So I don't know, ladies, first impressions. Tell everybody what's going on.
Active.
Yeah.
Active.
Super vibey.
Yeah. the spirits have definitely been missing people, it seems. And we've already got, just setting up our equipment, it's gone absolutely completely nuts. So.
And I had a spirit step into me and try to talk through me and kept trying to get me to hug Ken, which I thought was kind of funny.
I mean, it's hard to keep us from hugging Ken anyway, but still.
I have that kind of effect on women who are ghosts.
Oh my God. May I say, ladies, it's so nice to see you. Welcome to the East Coast. I know that it's not your first time over on this side, but it's always good to return, to be coming home, so to speak, for you, Melissa. But you picked the Paint House of all places. Now, here's where you're going to have problems. on our Patreon account, we have our town hall on Mondays, which we got to get you guys in there too. Ken will work that out with you all to come on, but I know
Yeah.
Cheryl's been there multiple times. It's a lot of fun. Well, we did a collective consciousness experiment a couple months back, and everybody remote viewed to the Pain House. So those of you that
Wow.
are in the chat right now that participated in that, feel free to remote view back there again tonight. And one of you can, I don't know, pull on Melissa's hair or tap Cheryl on the shoulder, or do something just to get them
And
hugging
if
Ken.
you guys want to do any experiments, pick a couple choice words. If you want them to try to come through the spirit box or EVP or anything like that, random words, and we'll talk about it tomorrow or on Monday.
There you go. Well, I am thinking of the word cheeseburger. So see if that comes.
So my.
It's
Who
a
isn't?
random one. You're not going to
Who
get that
isn't?
often. No.
Who isn't at this point? But this is going to be, it'll be fun tonight. We'll be checking in with the ladies from time to time as they pop in here, maybe between their sessions. So they've got the house pretty much set up right now with a battery of different equipment and stuff. And we've made some contact, and hopefully the lady of the house will see fit to acknowledge them and welcome her guests here tonight. So Melissa did her own walkthrough, and we took great pains not to tell her anything about it. And she just went very organically around the house, got, whatever impression she had. We talked a little bit about it later, whether to confirm or deny. And she was spot on in a lot of different things here with specifics that kind of got fleshed out. So I am like, hi, Carrie. I'm looking forward to checking in with them because this is an unusual situation in as much as they have complete autonomy over this house right now, 4 levels, and they're going to be everywhere.
I'm so excited. This place is amazing.
Yeah.
I had no idea what to expect. I love coming into a new location totally blind. Which is better for a medium because I don't want to have any outside influence. I want to know that whatever I'm getting is from the location as opposed to something someone told me. And then that's why it's better to have someone like Ken or Cheryl or whoever around me that has the history they can tell me later. But I can't believe how many different spirits I'm getting in this house. It's just they're everywhere. And the thing that really stuck out to me, and Ken, I have to bring this up, because when we first walked in, I was drawn in a particular direction. And then we stopped. And then, so Ken was standing. So where we are, there's like a kitchen that way. And Ken was standing here. And I could see that he was hearing something, and I was hearing something, and I was drawn in there. And I kept getting little kid running back and forth, back and forth. And I got giggling. I got stuff moving and things like that. And then of course it was, Ken, you confirmed later that there is a little girl who's here, and I'm really, really hoping that she shows herself to me tonight.
She's a doll. Also, one of our Patreon members is here as a special guest tonight. Sandy Andrews
Yes.
Oh yeah,
is also on
Yeah,
location.
come over. I was gonna try to turn. We're handheld right now, so it's a little.
Oh, there's Sandy.
Hi.
That's awesome. I think you guys are going to have a hell of a fun time. Enjoy the doll room. Yeah, we'll check back with you. You have the link now. So if you guys got something you want to bring to our attention, just link back in. And
got
we are so happy to have you on the other side.
Thank you. And now keep Ken busy. We got stuff to do.
All right, guys.
Ooh, okay. Out.
Take care.
Melissa and Cheryl out.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. They'll
Yeah.
check in from time to time, and
now we're just going down the road for our guest tonight in the same area, the New England area, correct?
You betcha. And I am extremely anxious to talk to her and get her perspective on a very iconic and famous case that also has one foot in the paranormal. So I'm looking forward to tonight. This is, I'm having a ball. This is a lot of fun. I think I'm going to go on location more often.
It's your backyard, that's for sure. With that, Ken, please do the honors.
Okay, now KIMBRA EBERLE has one foot in the music business and another in the literary field. She has written a book called Inadmissible, the case of Lizzie Borden and other murderous women. So we're going to get into the true crime aspect of this tonight. She has pored over transcripts and has some strong opinions on that particular case. But in fleshing it out, she also performed an investigation at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, and we are very anxious to find out what she experienced and her perspective on this. So, for the first time, please welcome to the show KIMBRA EBERLE.
Yay! Hi, Ken. Ken and I have known each other for quite a while. Gosh, I don't know, maybe at least 5 years or so, I would think.
Yeah, the first time you had contacted me for some information for your book, and I
Right.
am very, very, very honored to have
Yeah.
been a part of that. It was an amazing piece of work.
Yeah. And hi, George. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you also, Kimbra.
I watch your show periodically, and I really enjoy it when I watch it. There's a few times you sort of scared the bejesus out of me, but I
Oh, good.
am not a paranormal investigator, so to speak, but I had participated in the Lizzie Borden investigations because I was researching it. And I had a great opportunity. I was asked actually a few years ago. Brian Cano, who has Haunted Collector, he worked with John Zathis, and he's in paranormal caught on camera right now. He's involved with that, so he knows his stuff. And they were doing a retrial, a mock trial of Lizzie Borden. They not only did it once, they did it twice, actually 3 times. And I was up there for 2 of them, and I was on the prosecution side. So I did my research, and that whole experience was unlike something I've never experienced before, to tell you the truth. But before that, I did write the book, and I did a lot of research on Lizzie Borden. My book, just so you know, is 416 pages, and I wanted to write a book that had factual things in it. Like anything I said in the book, I put sources where I got that information from. So because there's so many people that have so many different views on the case, and I'm okay with that. But when they say something, I would like to know their sources and where they got this information from, because there's a lot of stuff going back and forth that certainly isn't true. So there's 98 references in the back of this book. Yeah. So,
So,
oh, yeah.
yeah, so when you delved into the transcripts of the trial, what stuck out to you the most? Because in the end, Lizzie was acquitted, and
hmm
there are a lot of fascinating levels as to how and why she was acquitted. So, in poring over the transcripts for the book, what immediately stuck with you?
Okay. Well, first of all, the transcripts are, I think, over 2,000 pages. So it's a lot of reading, and that's not including the inquest testimony. And first, I want to say that this trial would have never taken place at all if Alice Russell's grand jury testimony, they were just going to dismiss the case, but then something in her gut just changed her mind because she witnessed Lizzie burning the dress Sunday morning after the murders. So that was key in moving the case forward. It would have never happened. So what brought me to the trial, first of all, was a vacation like 30 years ago. And I just went to the house on a whim, and I found it fascinating. So there's a few things that made the difference for me. I do believe that she's guilty. And, first of all, the whereabouts of her, the trial testimony, well, really her inquest testimony, because she wasn't in the trial. You know, they threw that out because they didn't basically read her Miranda rights. So it wasn't, you know, they weren't allowed to use that in the trial. But, you know, her whereabouts, you know, she, in her inquest testimony, she put herself in many different places. And a lot of people say, oh, you know, she was on morphine and, but that's not true, because in my book, I talk about the morphine dosage, and it was a really super small dose. So it wouldn't have really, you know, affected her that much in her testimony. But everybody had an alibi. You know, Emma was away visiting friends, and she was really far away. So she was in Fairhaven. It was about 15 miles, so by horse and buggy it would take a long time to get to the house. John Morris, he had an alibi, and I mean, these are the famous things that I'm telling you right now that people go by. You know, he even remembered the number on the car, the car that he was riding, the conductor's hat number. Bridget Sullivan. So Lizzie was the only person in the house for both murders. The first murder, she was out washing windows, and she was talking to Nellie McHenry. Actually, no, she was talking to a neighbor, and that as a result of that, she was. They said that both murders were committed by the same person. So if she was outside for the first murder, then it wasn't her, because she wasn't, you know, there for. Actually, she wasn't really there for both murders. She was up sleeping when the second murder happened. So Bridget, Emma, John Morris, those were the main people that were probably a suspect, and they were all like dismissed as being suspects. They had alibis. So that left Lizzie. And just so people tuning in that don't know the facts, the stepmother was murdered first between 9:30 and 10, and she was struck 19 times. The father was murdered second, almost an hour later. He was struck 11 times between 10:45 and 11:05. And then the first officer arrived at 11:20, only 15 minutes after the call, you know, that they got the call. So there was no blood found on Lizzie minutes later, and a robbery was ruled out because, you know, if a person came in and there was only one way in, it was the backside door, because all the rest of the doors were locked in the house. So if a robber came in, first of all, he would have, you know, when is the time that he came in? Because that house was occupied up until 9:30, and the first murder occurred between 9:30 and 10. So how could he get in unless he came in the night before and hung out? And where would he hang out? Right. And then
Exactly.
leaving where Lizzie put herself downstairs ironing. I was in the kitchen reading magazines. You know, for him to leave after that, he would have run into her. And in her inquest testimony, she said she heard groaning. So if she heard groaning, let me see. I took some notes here because it's just so involved with the timeline. But it's next to impossible for a person to come outside, wait an hour, and then, you know, not knowing Andrew was coming home, because Andrew, you know, he wasn't expected home. He came home because he wasn't feeling good. So why would a guy wait around, you know, and then kill him too and then leave? It just doesn't make sense. So you have to ask yourself about motive.
Right. Well, here's another aspect to this, getting into the more salacious details of this. Any criminologist will tell you, and we don't advocate murdering anyone, but using a gun, for example, Unless it's some type of a mob hit, it's quite impersonal in a way.
Yeah.
But when you have a weapon in hand and you use it 19 times, and her father, and Andrew was how many times again, Kimbra?
11.
11 times.
Yeah.
So we are talking about a crime of passion. We're talking about extreme emotion, extreme anger, because you have the murder weapon in hand. It's not impersonal like shooting someone from 30 feet away. So there had to be an incredible amount of anger, pent up anger and emotion. So who had the motive
Lizzie
to
certainly did.
do something?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. An outsider, why would they come in and you know, like with that much power? I mean, the other thing too, it was a little hatchet. It wasn't a big axe. It was a little handheld hatchet. And if you hold one of those, they're not that heavy. A woman could hold it and do these murders. And I mean, you know, I've done experiments where I actually held a little hatchet and did it 19 times. It's pretty intense. I mean, and then for a 200-pound woman to drop on the floor, you can hear that. We also did that experiment. I'm sure you did too, Ken, where you can hear sound.
Yes, we did as well in one of our visits where we found someone who approximated Abby because she was a very stout woman.
Yeah.
So we found somebody to approximate her weight, and it is literally impossible to be where they claim to be and not hear that. Now, it's circumstantial. Maybe they heard a bang and paid no attention to it. I understand that, but it's next to impossible to not at least have some type of question in your mind. What was that?
Right, right. And when the first murder happened, supposedly Lizzie was downstairs ironing or something. I mean, she claimed to be out in the barn, but I don't buy that for a minute. I really don't. There's too many discrepancies. But I'll tell you, so motive is the key. And my research took me further into the Victorian era and domestic confines and restraints put on women at the time. And in the 1800s, you know, Lizzie was maybe a person that, and I really truly believe this, was into women's rights because she was really well read. She had a library in Maplecroft, you know, when it's all said and done, by today's standards was worth about $20,000 of books. And like women back in that time period were mostly confined to the home. And here's the reason I feel she did it. Looking at her as a woman in that society in the 1800s. Housekeeping and motherhood were the most important thing. Women were dependent upon a man. And you know, in that, it could have driven, well, it did, many women to like kind of madness, because such control has a psychological effect, you know, making a woman feel trapped. And women could not vote at the time. You know, the father was in charge until the woman was married. You know, men had all control of the money. So if a woman married, even if they had a fortune, that money would be in possession of the man she married. It would roll over to him. So in a statement by the Finchburg Sentinel, Massachusetts, August 13th, 1892, it is said by local gossips that the father discouraged all suitors, insisting that they were after the money. And for this reason, the girls were left without admirers and rarely went into company, unquote. So we don't know if Mr. Borden, you know, was like that, but there's a lot of things surrounding that and comments by neighbors of how Lizzie was acting and how unhappy she was. And you have to ask yourself, what was Mr. Borden's plan? You know, without the daughters being married, what was his plan? Was Abby going to get all his money? Because he was worth a fortune. at the time in Fall River. Were the girls included in his will? I don't even think there was a will at the time. Maybe he was making one up, assuming that Andrew intended to give the money to his second wife, Abby. Would that create a motive for murder? And also, a married woman, she couldn't own property. Like the girls had everything they needed. By their standards, they actually lived pretty good. Like they're saying that he might have been a miser or something, but he did give them. I mean, the house had heat. It had some finer things that a lot of people didn't have. But taken in the 19th century, women possessed no economical, political, or legal authority. They were conformed to restrictive gender norms of the time. Their roles were simply to get married before the age of 30 and live a submissive, unquestioning life of the devout wife and mother. And, Lizzie never married, neither did Emma. So it makes you think. They did belong to clubs, and I researched these clubs to what they were really all about. And she belonged to the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and that was really significant because that organization took strong positions regarding social reform, and it focused on advocating equal rights for women. So think about this. The clubs that Lizzie belonged to believed that, exploitation such as polygamy, child labor, they focused on all those things back then that really were really radical for women. And if I was a woman back then, I'd be pretty upset too. So she went on the grand tour. We all know about that, I believe, when she took a vacation to Europe, and she spent 4 months there. I think Andrew gave her the money to do it. So say he wasn't such a bad guy, right? And she went on this tour, and when she came back, she went with her, I think it was her cousin or something, Anna. And Anna testified at the trial that where's the quote? I'll find it. Lizzie said that she was upset going back to the house, that she, was unhappy going back to an unhappy home. And, when George Robinson and Mr. Moody, one of the attorneys said there's no language that can be stronger than the language used to express a permanent condition of things in the house. So if Lizzie didn't want to go back to the house, then there was something going on. She, as far as I felt like looking into Lizzie and like her frame of mind, I really feel like she felt trapped under her father's rules. She had a lot of outbursts, neighbors, even from her childhood. People said that she was depressed. I really feel she longed for a freedom, and she kept telling her father she wanted to move up to the hill. I think she really missed like those finer things in life that she got to experience on that tour too, because that was a high class tour that she experienced overseas.
Well,
So,
let's not forget too, after the murders and she was acquitted and she got her inheritance, she did something that she had always longed to do. And for those of you not familiar with Fall River, we're talking about what's called the Highlands. And it's just as it sounds. See, some of Fall River's elite, a lot of old money up there. And she bought Maplecroft. And to me, and at that point, she was very much shunned by the elite, by the old
the community.
money.
Yeah.
sure, the higher society, but yet she bought a house and plunked herself down smack in the middle of them. And I always looked at that like this was her last act of defiance, that I'm going to live among you one way or the other, whether you'll have nothing to do with me. And the home, if you've seen Maplecroft, is, and I know it was just sold to a family.
Hmm.
I've been in that residence, and
So have
it
I. Yeah.
is absolutely stunning. It is stunning. And to me, that was an act of defiance on her part. I'm going to get what I always wanted, because it must have been hard, because her father had a buck,
Oh yeah.
and why are we not living like everyone else, people of means? So to be able
Yeah.
to do that, you
Hmm.
know,
Another interesting fact: her mother died when she was very young, and but Emma was old enough to know her mother. Now, Mrs. Mary Livermore was a friend of her mother's, and she was a strong supporter of women's rights. And she was the founder of the Women's Home Journal, and she believed in Lizzie's innocence. But she was a really well-bred woman. So her views on women's rights is amazing. That she knew Lizzie's mother, and I always wondered if some of that was passed on to Emma, and then Emma passed some of that on to Lizzie. Because if you look at it, Lizzie had always tried to maintain some kind of independence throughout her life. But there was a very, when they were on the tour, and just to give you an idea of how people looked at her, when she was on that tour, one of the quotes that came from a woman, there's so much in my book, it's just so packed, but there was a letter written to her daughter and a comment made by Mrs. Duvall, a highly respected woman who had many social connections, and she said, "I do not know who she is." And this comment was referring to Lizzie and suggests that her relationship with the elite ladies was superficial. And it also suggests again that Lizzie didn't participate and was not on the list of many events in Fall River for the elite. Like, she belonged to all these clubs, but she dropped out of them also. So, and throughout her whole life, the word peculiar keeps coming up. She was peculiar. There was something about her. She was melancholy the whole way through her life, even to the end when she was living in Maplecroft. So I contribute that. And if you read my book, I really dive deep into it, that she could have been a little bipolar, because
oh,
you
sure.
know, like peculiar is means like peculiar people. And I mean, it makes you think. So Friday afternoon, I started for Lizzie Borden, who's real miserable. She fell last summer and now is feeling the effects of the fall. That is something very significant, because she was riding a horse and I think she fell off a horse, and she was down for a while. So looking through some things, okay. This is going to be crazy, Ken. This is going to be really crazy, but let me find it. So there's this book. Okay. So there's this book. It's called The Psychopath Inside, and a neurologist personal journey into dark side of the brain, James Fallon. So James Fallon quotes, "I have believed for decades that we have very little control over what we do and who we are. To me, nature, meaning genetics, determines about 80% of our personality and behavior, and nurture is the environment and how we're raised, only 20%. So Fallon started studying Purcell's mental state, like through PET scans. He analyzed scans of murderers and serial killers, He also compared them with the brains of non-killers and found there were clear differences. Yes, that's the book. So he used a psychological assessment called the Hare Checklist. And this test has 20 items that determine if you're a psychopath or not. So, he did this test and everything, and he included medical records, third-party references, the material. It's sorted into categories. One is interpersonal factors, which is superficiality, grandiose, deceitfulness, lack of remorse. Another one is behavioral factors, impulsivity, lack of goals, unreliability. And the third is antisocial behaviors. So the other thing that these descriptions include: shrewd, crafty, sly, deceptive, unscrupulous, underhanded, manipulative, gets bored easily, which Lizzie did, staying in a job for a longer time than they can feel very difficult, lack of motivation, which Lizzie was. I've read that people said she was lazy. But anyway, so Fallon says there's such a thing as psychopath light. And so in doing all these things, he decided to do his own testing. And he was doing a study in Alzheimer's or something, and he needed some healthy brains to compare the findings with. So he used his own family's brains. And all the PET scans came out great, except one. It was his own. And he had the brain scan of a psychopath. So he was going around his house asking family members, hey, do I act weird to you? So, and I'm getting to how this all ties in with Lizzie Borden. So when he came forward, the family said on his father's side, who's a genealogist, gave him this book called Killed Strangely, The Death of Rebecca Cornell. And what it is, it's about the Cornell family. Mm-hmm. And are you familiar with the Cornell family?
Yeah, very much so. It is the only time where the testimony of a ghost resulted in the death, in an execution of a murderer. Yeah.
Right. It's a crazy story, but it turns out, so Rebecca Cornell is ancestor of Ezra Cornell, founder of Cornell University. He was 73 years old she was 73 years old when she was murdered, and Rebecca was burned to death. But her first son, everybody thought it was an accident, but it turned out that her first son, Thomas, age 46, basically, I think, stabbed her and tried to cover it up. And, basically they found out later, and he was hung.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a great book. So anyway, it turns out that, so here's where it gets a little crazy. Thomas Cornell's wife gave birth to a daughter her name was Innocent.
Innocence was the name they gave her, almost out of defiance of his. Right.
Well, she was married to a Richard Borden, a direct ancestor of Lizzie Borden's father, Andrew. Mm-hmm. And Lizzie Borden, was a direct descendant, a fifth great granddaughter to Rebecca Cornell. And Rebecca was the fifth great grandmother in James Fallon's perennial line, which made Lizzie Borden James' distant cousin. So if you look at that, and in Rebecca's family, I think there was 7 people in the family, 5 men and 2 women, who were convicted of murder. And
it begs the question: is parenticide somehow a generic trait?
Yes, this is what I'm getting at. Does it run in it runs in the families greatly?
Right.
So here's another crazy thing. Okay, so this is just illuminating to me. So the other thing is, and James talked about damage of the brain. Now remember I said that Lizzie fell off a horse, possibly when she was young, because she was in bed and it's because she fell. So if at age 2, a child suffers damage to the orbital cortex, which involves ethics and morality, he may never develop a sense of right or wrong. That's at age 2. So if the damage occurs at age 8, the person's orbital cortex may have helped other parts of the brain understand right and wrong, but he won't be able to stop himself from committing wrong. But if the damage is at a teenager, which Lizzie was a teenager at the time, I believe, that person will know right from wrong, and other areas of the brain involved, they'll be mature enough to help impulsivity when the orbital cortex fails, but stressful conditions could easily push them over the edge. So if you look at that last category, I find that, and people would say, oh, you're trying to skew it to fit in and stuff. But no, I with all the other things added to her personality of saying the troubled person she was, it interests me highly. It really highly interests me, and if I was doing a paranormal investigation, that would be one of the questions I would ask. Did you fall off a horse and hit your head?
Well, some of the other details to this, and I think we've all heard, and I'm not sure if this is a theory in search of facts, but we heard about sexual abuse, incest.
Yeah.
We've heard all of that stuff, and I don't know if that's speculation or it comes from somebody who knows, or if it was a rumor or just something, again, we're looking for, we're trying to fit, our own facts to make a theory true.
Right. I don't have an opinion of that either way. I'm sort of leaning on the part, maybe not, just because there's a whole bunch of other things that come into play. I mean, Lizzie was living with the mother, and the uncle was there for some time too, living with them. John Morris was living with them a short time, I think in the other house though, when she was growing up. So where would they find the space and time? That's my question. And if there was sexual abuse, why wasn't Emma sexually abused too?
Right.
Why wasn't there something about that? So, we'll never know, right? We'll never know.
Of course not, and again, these are kind of some of the salacious details, but there was a lot of circumstantial evidence, the purchase of the prussic acid from the pharmacy. So immediately people start to think in terms of she was plotting something. And I don't know, but it's certainly circumstantial, but I think my bigger question in terms of the trial, in terms of the jury and the acquittal, how much did the idea back then that a woman could not be capable of such a heinous act? I mean, how much misogyny kind of worked in her favor, I guess, but you often hear that was the underlying attitude of a jury, that, it's impossible. A woman can't commit such atrocities.
Those are men that were talking about that too, because that was an all-male jury. If you spoke with women that had maybe rage, I mean, a lot of women back then. So that gets me to my other point. That night, the night before the murders, when Lizzie went over to Alice's house to tell her about the number of things. She told her about the break-in, and Alice was really surprised. She's like, "Whoa, there was a break-in," and all these things she's telling Alice about. And I fear that something bad is going to happen. She sort of preempted the next day, saying these things. So then the next day comes and the murders happen. And a few days before that, supposedly they were poisoned. There was an attempt, to poison them. I think when they were doing the autopsy, they did test for poisoning, and they didn't find prussic acid, but I don't know if they tested for arsenic, because arsenic leaves your body very quickly, and in small doses it could make you seem like you're sick. And if you want to go that route, maybe she attempted to and just didn't use enough arsenic, because that was very easy to get back then, arsenic. And it's a preference for women back in that time to use. Like, poisoning was the thing. All the other women that I, put in the book correlate really to Lizzie, and, they were convicted and acquitted. And, a lot of them suffered trauma, or, the one girl, Constance Kent, she lost her stepmother at a young age, and both these girls were called peculiar, and they were deprived from opportunities to pursue their life in their own making the way they wanted to, and they were let go. So you're talking about the all male jurors.
Right.
So they all had verdicts of, well, the one woman, Ellen Dunn, she beat her baby and dropped her out a window. And there were about 300 people that witnessed that. So the verdict after that, they are not satisfied that she was of sound mind when the act was done. So to be legally accountable for that, she is now insane and left to the court. So a lot of these women, were called insane, and they were still acquitted, but they were put in asylums. And Jane Toppan was one of the most famous back then, around when Lizzie was in Taunton jail. She killed 31 people in a hospital. She was a nurse, and she was caught and brought up to trial, and she was put in the Taunton Insane Asylum, which was very close to the Taunton jail. And supposedly Lizzie visited the Taunton Insane Asylum. Somebody was doing an examination on her of her mental capacity, supposedly. And, here's this serial killer in there too. So I just thought that was funny. But as far as insane asylums, so here's my thing. The night before, Andrew and John Morris, I think Abby, were down in the sitting room talking, and supposedly Lizzie overheard a conversation. Well, most people think that was about banking for the next day and the will, right? Discussion of the will. I believe it was a discussion of possibly the theory of putting Lizzie in an asylum. And maybe, possibly, now hear me out, they could have been planning that because there was one thing that Andrew said, and this is why I say that. Andrew told Emma before she left, make sure I can get in touch with you if I need to. And why would he say that to her? She's gone on this trip, and, why would he say that to her? Maybe they were planning to they were going to commit her. And back then...
It's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, back then, women, and I'll give you an idea, women could be put in an asylum. Here's some reasons.
Just for disobedience.
Yeah. Okay, so imaginary female trouble, hysteria. They could be committed for religion. And I actually have a person, I talk about in my book that they did put her away for a while because her husband was like this religious person, and she didn't agree what he was doing, so they committed her. Derangement, domestic trouble, superstition, political views, and astonishingly, reading novels. You could be put away for that.
My goodness, can you just imagine? Political
Look at Lizzie's
views.
library. It's like...
You say?
Yeah. So
I
I
am
also,
going, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, go ahead. Just, yeah. So these are
Oh,
the reasons.
I was just going to, invite George back in because we're
Oh,
going to
sure.
come up on the hour break a little bit. But
Hmm.
just to mention, um, there are people that would have issue. For I believe she did it as well. But there were people that would take issue with the idea that she committed the crimes, and I'm not sure if people are just doing it to be contrarians or not, but we've heard John Morris, an unnamed business associate. We've heard Bridget, the maid. We've heard about Lizzie acting in concert with Bridget somehow, or perhaps, Bridget and her were lovers. And
Yeah.
again,
Crazy
I
stuff.
go back to theories searching desperately for facts.
So, okay, I don't know if you're aware that there was one interview that Lizzie conducted while she was in jail. And it was done by Mary Livermore, who owned the Women's Journal in Boston. And this interview was May 27th, 1893. So she did this interview. It's a very long interview, but I want to read you the last passage that Lizzie said to Mary. And the only reason I want to read this to you is because people always compare the Lizzie Borden trial to the O.J. Simpson trial. You
Hmm.
know, like, oh, 50% believe he did it, 50% didn't. But he did that whole scenario when he said if he did it, how he would do it. Well, Lizzie did the
Right.
same thing. So here's what Lizzie said to this woman in the interview. She goes, "How can they think of me guilty? What a fool must I have been if I committed crime like that in broad daylight, with the certainty of detection, with people going to and fro on the street, with Bridget washing windows and likely to come in for water at any minute, with my uncle visiting us and likely to be back at any time, with the curtains up and the neighbors astir. I knew every foot of that house. I could have walked all over it in the dark, sure of my way. Why? If I contemplated that crime, should I have not done it at night? Two blows as they lay asleep, no noise, no stir. I could have opened the window wide, the street door, made evidence of a struggle in the room, and then plenty of time, remove myself from all traces of blood, going quietly to bed. But they say I committed both crimes at noonday and removed from myself all evidence of a horrible work. How could they believe that?"
My, that is quite the
She said that though.
yeah. That's all been like kind of worked out, hasn't it? I mean,
Yeah. I when I read that I thought, my God, she was even like how long did it take her to think of that answer?
right. So, I mean, it does show a certain lucidity
Hmm.
on her part, or that part of her brain that was just devious enough to look at all this. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
George, why don't you come back in? Let us know what are we looking at for time here. I'm on my phone, so I have no idea. It could be like 2:30 in the morning. I have no idea.
We are 3 minutes coming up before break.
Okay.
And on the other side, we'll continue our interview with Kimbra, extending into some other famous female murders or accused female murderers. So it'd be interesting to talk topic with regards to that. The amount of research that you did on this, Kimbra, how much of it was just book to book research? How much of it was field research?
Okay, so I visited the house maybe 5 times
Okay.
in that area, and then the rest was 2 years, 2 years of reading, libraries, just digging up whatever I could find source wise. Yeah.
And did it take you to a point where lineage wise you could have come across some of the ancestors, someone that you could have connected with or talked to about this?
No, because
Never-
I think they're all dead.
Really?
All the well, the I'm not sure really the ancestors. I think there's very few people that is actually connected to her living. I never went that route. Because that's a whole other year.
Something, Kimbra, and
Looking
I
for
just want to
them
say,
and yeah.
I just want to say this quickly. Being from that area, and at one point I grew up 7 minutes away from Lizzie Borden house.
Oh,
I will tell you that the amount of people who claimed
Oops, excuse me.
Borden lineage rivals the amount of people who claim that their lineage started at the Mayflower, which is just like everyone. Everyone
Yeah.
had an ancestor came over on the Mayflower. Everybody had an ancestor that was in the Borden family. So
And maybe
it's a
that's
prominent
why.
name.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Oh yeah,
I
there
mean,
were a lot. There were a ton of Bordens. So that's a lot of research, George. It really
Sure.
is. And I mean, I wanted to stay more of women in society and how the women murderers are all connected, living in that century, basically, and why they would want to commit murders. And ironically, the Roe versus Wade thing, decision kind of took women a step back these days also. And there is a whole thing about women being pregnant and, being killed if they aborted their child back in that time, in that century, they would be murdered, killed if they did it. But yet, they had no control over their body either. So, yeah. And I think that's why, they say, we don't want to go back. Of course we don't want to go back. So,
The book is called Inadmissible: The Case of Lizzie Borden and Other Murderous Women. And again, we'll put up the link that you can go to for the website for the book. But we have to go to break at this point in time. We come back on the other side. We'll continue our conversation and go down a couple of different avenues with some other murderous.
we'll check in with our investigators as well.
That's right. All right. So we'll be back on the other side with KIMBRA Eberly. Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll see you just on the other side of the break. You're watching Dead or Alive on the Dead or Full Spectrum channel. Stay with us.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
As UFO reports come in from around the world, the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, is there. We continue to explore new cases and build our massive database. We share our information with the world in a number of ways. If you would like to be part of our investigative team, you are always welcome. What could be more exciting than exploring the UFO question firsthand? Join MUFON, find your friends.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
That's right, guys. Make sure, again, you do get the opportunity to join us with our town hall sessions. Again, on Patreon, you can certainly come and check us out. Dead Air Paranormal. We just saw the announcement tonight. Joseph Frezza has joined us as a Patreon member. He'll
Boy,
be joining us
Joe.
in town hall. So
Way to go,
we're
Joe.
excited. It's going to be a lot of fun tomorrow night, too. We've got something else. Ken is still going to be out and about, aren't you?
Yeah, we have what has to be termed an undisclosed location that we are going to be doing tomorrow night. And I am going to be joining Melissa and Cheryl and a group of others somewhere historical. So I'm looking forward to that. I have a golf tournament tomorrow, but we're going to go immediately from there to this city, and conducting an investigation as we normally do. We can't give my details about it. Sorry, but I'm looking forward to putting together whatever we get, and of course sharing it with y'all. And Patreon, absolutely $3 a month for a lot of stuff where we sort of pull back the curtain a little bit and talk about the things that maybe we can't talk about on the show. So very much looking forward to that.
This is BS. You out there golfing, doing investigations, and down here in Florida, we're dealing with this. This is not a repeat of last week's Helene. This is due to hit us in 2 days, and it actually is predicted to get a little bit stronger. But the thing of it is that there's a cold front that's coming down that may push it further south. Now, if you guys see where Tampa's at, all right, and you go across that line where it's hitting, the East Coast side is exactly where my house is. So, if you guys up north can do me a great big favor, and that includes the visitors like Cheryl and Melissa, if you guys could just all together just go blow really, really hard, that get that cold front further down, over the next 24 hours, just a lot of that, and see if it'll help us too.
Well, apparently we can control the weather, but we won't go there.
Please do something, because it's getting a little bit old. And 6 days after that, another one's supposed to come through. So unbelievable. Speaking of West Coasters up in your area, Melissa and Cheryl are back with us also, as well as Sandy Andrews. There we go. Oh, yes.
They found props.
Hang on. Okay, I just checked the weather update. It's hitting Cuba. So that was a good one. Excellent, guys. Thank you so much for your assistance. Thumbs up.
Anytime. Anything for you, George.
So what's going on over there, ladies, at the Payne House?
Well, we're having some fun. We moved over into the kitchen, and Cheryl has her fun little, hold up your toy. So she's got this set up, and we're fairly certain that Clara has been playing with it quite a bit. My REM pod is going off like freaking crazy to the point we had to turn it off.
We had to shut it off so we could do a little bit of EVP, and we did get immediate responses. So when we did ask, can you, what even did we ask?
How old she was? We asked how old she was, and it almost like we can't tell if she said I am 4 or I am 5. So we wanted to ask you, Ken, how old she is.
She's 4.
Okay. So that's what she said. The first time we listened to it, I was like, I think it's 4, and then we listened to it again. We're like,
maybe it could be 5.
But then she said a whole sentence afterwards. But it's kind of garbled, so we don't really know what she said.
It's a work in progress, but lots of interaction, lots of direct communication. Hey, can you turn this thing on? Can you go over here? Show us where you are, dowsing rods, lights. So it's really, really active. So we're just trying not to stay in one place in the house. We're going to move into the room where they have all the military equipment and things, and see how the energy changes for us.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think George, I'm going to need like a little bit longer break. So I know you're going to get into the psychology of murderers here. So I may take a little bit longer of a break because I think I want to go check on my guests tonight for a little while.
We really can't be trusted.
No, we can't be trusted.
No, that's what I'm saying.
All right. Thank you very much. And guys, continue and good hunting.
Thank you.
All right. And to bring our very special guest on tonight, KIMBRA Eberly, and we are looking forward to this half because I'm looking forward to talking about the other murderous women, and this is particularly surrounding your book. So give us a name rundown first, KIMBRA, and then we'll pick and choose which ones
wow. Okay.
I am going to know.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to leave for a little bit if you guys don't mind, and George will bring me back in a little bit later.
Okay. All right.
I know George has one woman in particular I guarantee he wants to talk about.
Yep.
Oh, I
Yep.
hope I know about her because I don't know everyone. You're like, okay. It's just like,
Okay,
all right.
I'll be back.
So, alrighty. All right. Thank you. So I have women basically from around the 1800s, and actually one young girl that I recently wrote in my new book, which is called The Writer's Block. It's a collection of short stories from other authors too, and it's about a 15-year-old girl who actually gets put to death. It happened in the 15th century. But anyway, the story of Constant Kent is in my book. Ellen Dunn, who actually lives was a resident of Massachusetts. We have Marie Lafarge, Florence Bravo, I talk about, Madeline Smith, Anthony LaCosta, Nellie Bly, who investigated in asylums. I put her in my book. Let's see, and Polly Boudin, who was the Witch of Staten Island. She was famous in Staten Island. And then I had a list of, Jane Toppin, who was a nurse who murdered 31 people. I mean, there's so many, George. There's so many of them, and they all kind of come up with the same kind of thing. So here's some more. Lucretia Chaplin, that was in 1831. She killed her husband with arsenic poison, not guilty. And Simpson, who killed Alexander Simpson of arsenic poisoning, not guilty. Hannah Kinney, not guilty. Again, arsenic poisoning. Like that's what makes Lizzie so unique, because it was a hatchet. And a lot of these women used poison, which back then, like arsenic, was pretty undetectable. So,
and you're saying allegedly, though, because they were found innocent.
Right. Most all of them. But you have to remember, back then it was an all male jury. So men had a compassion. They were kind of like knights in shining armor, and felt like a responsibility towards women to kind of rescue them in a way, no matter like how bad it was. So it was a definite societal thing. If those same women were tried today, they would probably be found guilty, because the difference is we have forensics that could prove it. And back then there were no forensics. So to even figure it out, the only thing they had to use was body content, like stomach content,
right,
and the temperature of a body, and pretty much what they saw. I mean, there was no gadgets or anything to use to figure things out. So
now, when they get to a point in time that there's so many on trial, and you only named a few, but it's still, for that time, I mean, there were not many serial killers, period.
No.
Jack the Ripper was, the only one who made to that point in headlines, but to have that many over and over again, they have to, at least at that point in time, be a little. I mean, they put a lot of them away in psychiatric hospitals again for things that should not have somebody committed. But something like this comes up, and then you start to really wonder, how many were really starting to lose it under the circumstances of being very pushed down in society, and how many of these things made them snap. How much was it included to, and it might be in part of your research, domestic abuse, things of that sort that they had to contend with and would push them over the edge. But it seemed to be enough of a number that it would justify certainly committing some of these women. Would you agree?
Yes, I actually agree with all of that. Uh, so, like I said, women, and men. I think at some point, men had to become afraid of even drinking something, that a woman gave them, like dinner. Well, let's have dinner. In fact, there's one woman in my book that the woman gave him dinner and there was poison in his dinner, and she slowly kept poisoning him until he died. But they were very rich, so they had a lot of people come in and investigate it, but they could never prove anything. So that's how the women got away with it. But again, in that society, men continued to control the means of reproduction, because women had no control
No
over
say.
their body, right? No say. So political expression, women weren't allowed to vote, and they quite frankly weren't even allowed to say anything.
Do
Also,
these are these any of the category we're talking about? Do you
uh,
recognize any of them?
yeah, probably two. I think the one in the bottom middle, I think that is Jane Toppin.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Do you know who they are?
I'd have to pull up the
They they
website
all
itself.
they all look like killers though.
Yeah, famous serial killers. Okay, famous serial killers who shocked Victorian Britain. So
Oh, okay.
it wouldn't fall under our category here. I'll have to readjust that and see what
Right.
else I can find. But I
Yeah.
thought I'd just pick it up interestingly, and they all look angry.
Yeah, they
Every
all look
one of them.
scary, right? Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to. Okay, so political, okay, virtually all freedoms, which in turn cause justifiable fear and confusion and anger. And when women acted out in society, the society viewed them as neurotic or psychotic. Oh, there's something going on. And I can say in the Salem witch trials, I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. I'm not real familiar, but I do know one thing, that in those trials, the women were accused of acting out and being in a frenzy and crazy, and she's just acting like insane and weird. Back then, I have in my book too. I hope people get my book because it's really broken down into different sections. One, I explained food, and there's certain elements of poison that they actually use to make bread, different things. And there was this plant. I forget what it was called. There's so much information, you just don't know exactly. But it was a plant that was accessible, sort of like if you picked a mushroom, and it was a hallucinogenic. So they're saying the reason that the women acted like that in the Salem witch trials is because they had something that they were eating that made them
Oh, come on.
hallucinate,
Yeah.
like
No.
instead of being a witch. Do you believe in witches? I don't know if I do.
I believe that there was a cult-like following with certain people of that ilk because no different than the Christianity or Catholicism that was going on, but followed it from a different perspective that may again have been a threat to many of those. So what better way than to get rid of them? I mean, Spanish Inquisition went down the same route. It's
Right.
all, I think, more based on politics than it is and power than it is on the actual, sanctity of an individual soul. And you know, it's what a funny thing that today that seems to be completely accepted. As a matter of fact, Melissa, who's there at Pain House, is a practicing witch. So
Okay.
we jump into uh, a whole nother topic when we talk about the belief systems for that time in our world.
Hmm.
Everything was mystifying. Everything was suspect to being, something cult-like or paranormal, and anything that was not of church was considered to be diabolical, was considered to be evil, and it was easy to just rid. If it wasn't by punishment, which there were many, then putting someone to death would be the next step on it. And you know, I guess for these women who understood arsenic, and you wonder as to whether or not that was something that kind of made it through the communication chains, that so many of them knew of arsenic and what it could do and how quickly it would dissolve in a human body,
Yeah.
that it was a current and common thing for the time.
Well, they
I
put
don't know.
arsenic in green paint to make it that color. So even in the household, or it was very available. It's like prussic acid, you needed like a prescription, but arsenic you could get anywhere. So yeah. So what I also want to touch on, and back then too, so a woman could be executed if found concealing the death of her child. And those executions were very common, since women who were violated by men and had virtually no recourse or safeguard, right, to avoid pregnancies resulting from rape, incest, whatever it was. There was no birth control. In order to escape those consequences, a desperate woman would try to hide her pregnancy. And to kill an unwanted child at birth, so I wanted to say, in killing their infants, they not only committed murder, they also asserted symbolically that a woman should not be punished for her sexuality, that she is entitled to some measure of control of her own body. Such statements challenged civil and the divine authority in a patriarchal society back then. So in the 18th century, a child out of wedlock, and it became common practice with penalties and stuff. I mean, there's so many things that was really scary, as far as a woman. And back in the Lizzie Borden trial, menstruation was left out of that whole trial because neither one of those lawyers wanted to talk about the pail of the bloody rags down in the basement that they found, which maybe by today, if forensically, if they would have looked at that, that could have been rags that they used to clean up the blood.
Right.
So, so they didn't talk about that at all in the trial, really. It was
Just
brought up, but then it was dismissed.
I find it hilarious, though, as you were telling those particular anecdotes that you were saying, way back then and as it was, and I'm sitting there going, man, women are kind of fighting the same battle today.
Oh my God.
Not
Are
much
we,
has
are we going to
changed.
go there? I mean, well, yes.
Yeah,
And
well, went there,
people,
but yeah.
no, but it's good you're going there. I'm glad you said something because, it's not only about abortion. That's not, I mean, it's the topic. Of course, it's a topic, but it's also about other women's rights or anybody's right,
Well, it's
actually.
about control. It's simply about control.
Yeah. I mean, if you take away one thing, what else are they going to do? Take away the rights to vote, take away, people's right to marry the same sex. I mean, where are they going to draw the line?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it's like what I talked about with the witches. It's about power. It's about control and what they had to deal with at that time. And I'm sure the women, again, regardless of the fact that they didn't get the chance for the education that they deserved, there are people out there that just are intelligent at the core. It has nothing to do with being able to go to university, that they could simply read the books that are available for them at home, at the local library, and educated themselves and did the best that they possibly could, but had to do it in the shadows because of that time. And as I said, there are still some parallels that we see today that are just terrifying.
Well, speaking of books, I mean, women really weren't allowed to go. They were only allowed to go to certain schools, like refinery schools, to teach you how to serve the man, and or the occupations they were allowed to serve were teaching and nursing. It really doesn't go beyond that. So they were really confined as far as education. And look at the book bans today. Why are we banning books, really? I mean, are we afraid to look at history, or what is the reason? It's I think it's terrible.
Now, go ahead.
Well, the other thing too, men and where they stand. We talk about women, but men back then were never punished for adultery, but wives were expected to look the other way and be silent. However, if a woman committed adultery back then, the law stated that her husband had the right to kill her. Yes, and I have sources in my book for that. So such the power of a man, and refusing sex as a punishment or granting sex as a reward might have been, what women did against, domestic tyranny. So it's like a little rough back then. But it was a vicious cycle, womanhood at the time, especially that of a well-bred woman, to carry out a murder, let alone a double murder, would be really unheard of.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But they find themselves now being part of history, and yet nothing is learned from that history. As a matter of fact, to this very day, a lot of the times, yes, there are still more sophisticated ways of killing when it comes to murderous women that are out there, whether it be guns, but they still seem to be on the aspect of poison, a more personal attack, or even those who have done those things even to their children, feeding them food with some sort of a drug in the food that's no taste, no smell, but will eventually do some damage to them. And I'm wondering as to whether or not that's something you're looking forward to looking into the 20th century, which particular women out there almost follow suit to what you've done research on already.
Yes, it's funny that you asked that. I am like started kind of reporting of looking at the development of women through the ages. So say the 1800s to the 1950s to now. And what has changed, and yes, murder has changed too. There's it's different today than it was back then. And I mean, we look at that woman that killed her children. I think she put them in a car and drowned them or something. And things like that. Hysterics, poverty. I mean, there's different reasons now for women to kill than back then, because women have more rights now. Women are allowed to go to school. They go to college. They don't have to marry. They can live on their own. I mean, many things have changed. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, and something definitely I'm interested in furthering to understand what it's like. So there was this one woman that was, I know you were talking about
that I was talking about?
Well, I was thinking about, you said women killed because of religious reasons too. Um,
I guess to the core of it, when you're talking about those women that you wrote about in your book, if you were to make a psychological evaluation, a layman's evaluation uh, to the psychology of why the women did what they did, would you categorize it in the aspect of hormonal, societal, or is it each and every one of them individualistic themselves?
all of the above. It's all of the above. Women are hormonal, and that hasn't changed in time. So, but back then it was more taboo to discuss. In fact, when women went for examinations, they stood up, in a dress. They didn't. It's not like today because there's some shame involved with that. So, and I even remember when I was a young girl, to go to the grocery store, or to go to a pharmacy and get Tampax, you had to ask for it. It was behind the counter. So it's like a lot of things have changed. But the first female doctor was in 1849, and that's 1849 was the first female doctor. I'm looking through here a little bit. And you remember back then, legs and arms were referred to as limbs. You couldn't have an exposed ankle. There was a fainting couch, when women, had their time of the month. People just left them alone. So yeah, hormonal things had a lot to do with that.
So I'm looking
So
here.
in the trial, Lizzie Borden's class status bestowed her respectability, and she benefited from the place in society as she was considered a lady. So those things were not brought up, like menstruation. It was raised but then quickly squashed. So she benefited from the dominant male taboo on discussing any of that. Yeah, so in a way, that was another reason why she got off, because they thought that she was too much of a lady to even consider doing that.
So it was a character prejudgment based upon the women of the day. And the outside of that random is just something that the jury probably couldn't even fathom.
Right. They went in and they came back out not guilty. They probably just were smoking a cigar, and drinking, having a shot or something, and then they came back out and they didn't even discuss it.
Well,
I
how
don't
long
believe
was
me.
the deliberate? Did they say how long the deliberation was?
They did say, and I can't remember, but it was short. I could look that up. But yeah, it was really a short amount of time. Deliberation.
Now, I'm wondering as to whether or not that was also a common theme with the other women who were exonerated.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Look at it. 10-minute deliberation.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, they made it up in their heads before they even
they
went in.
probably smoked a cigar and, talked about their work day. And let's see, the trial was 15 days. So another thing about this picture, when I visited the Lizzie Borden house, I went to the Fall River Historical Society, and they had that actual photograph there on an easel. And the jury sent it they took it and gave it to Lizzie Borden, and I think it was in Maplecroft. As a gift, they gave her that. Could you imagine? That's like, oh, well, we watched you for 15 days and we acquitted you. Here's a picture of us for you to hang in your living room.
Yeah, we're your biggest fans. Jesus.
I just found it very strange.
Yeah, I wonder whether or not they find themselves at this point in time, the court systems finding that they had to either change their tactics with regards to this or just simply give up. That's where a lot of these situations came about, where justice was done outside of the courtroom, um, such as the witches in Salem. They just decided we're not going to go down that route because it's a no-win scenario. How do we prove witchcraft? So, this is really, I think, for me, an eye opener to what they had to endure, and then to be able to know there was some bit of relief that there was a batting average in their favor without question.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and I think women, have had enough, and that's why they murdered. And men eventually became fearful. So like I said, it's like a vicious cycle. They like had grabbed onto more control then. As women rejected them, or became defiant. So honestly, it was well, I think any time period has its ups and downs, living in different time periods. But the 1800s was certainly a turning point, especially with the suffrage movement going on, and Lizzie saw it in her lifetime. Lizzie, she died in 1927, and Congress ratified with the 19th Amendment, granted women the right to vote. That was in 1919. So that was 8 years. Lizzie lived 8 years after, that was passed. So
God.
she saw a lot in her lifetime change, and in 1927, you're coming into the Roaring 20s, where the whole dress code changed too. Women started to become really defiant and started wearing short skirts, and it was a time of partying, and like all kinds of things were going on in the Roaring 20s.
And
So
looking here, Lizzie Borden gravesite is in Fall River at the Oak Grove Cemetery.
yes.
And it was also defaced. Somebody
uh
spray painted it.
oh, that's a shame. Yeah, I think her name was spelled different too on the gravesite. Like something, there was a mistake on the tombstone. Not her tombstone, but the real tall monument. I think there was a mistake in it. But yeah, she didn't have many people attend her funeral either. She had a very small funeral. And I don't know, you being a paranormal investigator, I've heard some of the things that you've been through, and God bless you. I'm a scaredy cat, so to speak. I don't want any of that stuff, and I wish Ken was here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Thank you. So the first time like that I got invited up to the Lizzie Borden house with Cano, that group, they were doing an experiment to see like a trigger kind of thing. So we had a mock trial, and I remember it was crazy because I didn't know what to expect, and we went up and we did the mock trial, and she was acquitted. And that night there was an investigation, and I was out sitting in the hallway with this other girl, and it was only like about 10 o'clock at night, and they were in Abby's murder room. They were doing their EVPs, and we're sitting out there, and I've never had paranormal experiences ever, but we heard a baby crying, and it was very distinct. And I'm like, did you hear that? And the girl's like, yeah. And it went again. "Eh." And then I yelled into the room to Brian. I said, did you hear that baby crying? And he's like, no. So when they got home, they reviewed the tape. And when they took it back to where I yelled, did you hear a baby crying? They rewound it, and they picked up the baby crying. So I found that like terribly kind of weird, because where's this baby? And I'm thinking, oh, it's outside, it's next door. So you know about the house, which is now a coffee shop, that where, and it's not a relation, but Ilsa Borden basically had children, and she threw them down the well, in the well in the basement, and then she slit her own throat. There were 3 children. I think one lived,
One escaped.
and one escaped. Right. So I was thinking, well, maybe it's that, because that's
You
next
know,
door.
it's funny that you mentioned that because we were just at the coffee shop, I believe,
Oh,
Friday. We were just at the coffee shop Friday, and we were invited to go downstairs. And it's not what I expected in the cellar. It's all inlaid wood cabinets because it was actually a doctor's office. The cistern that you refer to, where
yeah.
that crime was committed, is off of that room. And we have very graciously been invited to go down and perform an investigation of that spot. And this was actually decades before the Borden murders that this happened. And there seems to be, from reports, a crossover of children from one property to the other, which is why in the upstairs at the Borden house, they have that room dedicated to a bunch of toys hanging around because child spirits are purported to come and go from that room.
So I guess it was children living in the house before the Bordens got there?
Either that or there is a crossover of properties, one or the other. I know that, it has been residence to a few people. It was,
Yeah.
I believe a boarding house at one point. So since the
Okay.
Bordens owned it,
Yeah.
it's changed hands a few times, and it was only relatively, I don't know, maybe the 80s when it became a bed and breakfast, and I can stand to be corrected on that.
Yeah. I think Martha Quinn was the first original owner. Her name is Martha Quinn, and she claimed to have experienced spiritual things
Right.
also. Yeah.
I must tell you, for the longest time, as close as the Borden house was to me, I had never set foot in it for no reason other than I just had no reason for it. So for the longest time, I looked at it as a murder mystery, nothing more, nothing less. In spite of a lot of people that I know personally going there having experiences. And I must tell you, when we went in there, I changed my mind and my thinking on that based on some of the things we documented.
So
So,
hold your thought a minute. Here's Martha McGinn, and her
yeah,
grandparents first
Martha
owned the
McGinn,
home,
right?
and it was a bed and breakfast in 1996. And then Martha
Okay.
claimed to have paranormal activities. She heard footsteps and sounds of furniture being moved. So
Yeah.
I know, mentioned that you heard that too.
Yeah. We were downstairs the very first night we went. There were 5 of us. We were all present downstairs, and somebody is walking around on the first floor, and I just busted out laughing, just like, okay, you convinced me there's something more going on here. But we took a little bit different tact, Kimberly, because when we went in with the idea that we weren't going to go in like thousands of people ahead of us relitigating a murder trial, because how many people have gone in there, confess, did you do it? Instead, when we went in, we talked about her work with the women's group in the church and her love of animals. And we did the same thing at Maplecroft on the 2 occasions we went in there. We stayed away from that entirely and
Hmm.
decided to take, a different perspective on it and ask her about her life. And I have to tell you, and this is all documented, it seemed to pay dividends to us because we didn't go in confrontationally We just wanted to be a little bit different than everybody else who's looking for a confession or,
I
some
totally
some of the
respect that.
gory details. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally respect that because you're right, and I think people go in with preconceived notions when they ask those questions, and they're expecting an answer. Lizzie, did you do it? Yes, and can you make yourself hear the answer?
I'm sorry.
That's a question. Can you make yourself hear the answer that you want to hear, going in with a preconceived notion of what you're looking
Um,
for?
yeah, I think that you can if you're using certain devices. Like,
Yeah.
we don't use spirit boxes. We don't do anything like that. It's pretty simple because we believe sometimes less is more. We don't get burdened with equipment where we have some type of preconceived idea of what we're looking for back, which is why a lot of times we ask questions to things that we really don't know. Because I can read all the books in the world on Lizzie Borden and have this idea of what happened and have my opinion instead. That's why we decided to ask about things like the church and animals and other travel, other things in our life, other
Yeah, I love
than,
that.
yeah, what everybody else has is been burdened by, really. Because I think it's kind of a burden when you are kind of myopic about it and you're only coming from that direction.
Hmm.
So I'm not interested in that. I want to hear emotional content.
Yeah.
Like, what
So
did you like? What did you love?
oh yeah, oh yeah. I have to tell you that I think I'm attached to something in that house. And
Ah,
I'll tell you why. And like I said, this is why I'm a scaredy cat. So the second time I went to the house, not the second investigation time, I should say. Same group, Brian Cano and his team, and I love hanging out with them guys. They're really funny and a lot of fun. But before I even went there, and I was writing the book at the time. It's like, okay, and I'm really into the research and stuff. And you saw that picture of me with the timeline board, and I really went all out this time. So what happened was I got a flat tire. It's the day before I'm going. I got a flat tire. I'm like, okay. So then the day of, and I was with three other people. We're driving up. We stop at a gas station. We're going to do a tour of Fall River. My muffler, the entire muffler falls off my car. And we couldn't do the tour. So we, had to spend a day in a hotel, $400 to get the muffler fixed. Then there was the trial and that night investigation. And then I came home. But I have these light fixtures in my kitchen, and underneath the cabinet there's these long lights, and they have a plastic covering, and they snap on and off. The whole time that between the first time and the second time that I visited, every time I put effort into the Lizzie Borden case, those light fixtures would pop off by themselves. I would be typing away and all of a sudden hear pop, and I'd go out in the kitchen and the light fixture was off. And I'd pop it back on. Second investigation. It never happened in between. It was only when I was focused on the investigation. Second time, it happened like 2 or 3 times, and I kept popping them back on. And I'm like, why is this happening? So between then and even now, I have to tell you now, the time when you invited me here on this show, that week, I'm sorry, a friggin' light fixture popped off. And it freaked me out so bad. It just freaked me out. And
I
so, you know what?
apologize.
No, to this day right now, I left it off. I did not put it back on. But I
Oh,
feel like there's some kind of weird attachment that every time I work on the Lizzie Borden case, like stuff like this happens. And I don't know if I'm getting closer to something or if I have some kind of connection, but why is this happening? That's my question. And like, they're still off. I'm going to wait a week and then I'll put them back on.
There you go.
But
Let me know how you make out with those. Seriously, I'm curious now.
but you know, and they're hard plastic things. They just like snap off by themselves.
Right.
So
Right.
Kenny, you know, he lives with me, and he said, "Oh, they're probably just heated up or something," or you know, he's coming up with reasons behind it. But
Sure.
I'm like, I'm just creeped out by that kind of thing, and you know, I have. By the way, I have some friends that might be really interesting guests for your show. One of them is a famous writer, R.C. Matheson. He used to work for UCLA Paranormal Group, and he quit. And he worked on the Entity. The
Was
house,
he was working with Kerry Gaynor and Barry Taff?
possibly.
And
But
I forget who the woman was who was the director of that program. Oh my God.
yeah.
Yeah, but
But some weird stuff happened that he left. So, but they were working on the Entity house, or where the that occurrence. So
Doris
him,
Bitter case, yeah.
yeah, and he's a great person to talk with. He's really cool. And then
Love to.
my friend Mary Dominio, who's a stand-up comic in. She's great. She's worked off Broadway, and she told me about something that happened to her in Long Island, and she had me so scared. And honestly, she had to go to a priest to straighten her ass out because of this thing that happened to her with a spirit in a house in Long Island. So she would be someone really interesting to talk to, and maybe you could
Well,
talk
I'm
to her about
intrigued
that.
now.
Yeah.
We
So
will have to talk, because in both cases, for me, it's exactly the kind of guest that we've been looking for.
yeah,
You
those
know,
two in
with the
particular. Yeah.
and if it's the one in Long Island, then I'm not holding my breath. If it's the Long Island poltergeist case, maybe it's not. But oh
Well,
my God, I'd
she was
love
staying
to
at a
talk to some.
she was staying at a friend's house who didn't tell her that there was some kind of like entity in there, or ghost, or whatever it was, and she was in the room alone and basically pinned down for about a half an hour, and somebody talking in her, until her husband walked in the room and it all stopped. But she told me the whole, it's a long story, but oh my God, I couldn't sleep that night. I was just like keeping the lights on, it like really intense stuff, and I felt for her, and I told her not to talk to me anymore about it, because I don't know if they I give you credit, if they can come over like that, it's like I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. Well,
It's
it's the
it's
kind of thing that you decide a long time ago that, do I want to go down this path?
mm,
And, I think I speak for a lot of people who have been in it for a long time. We weigh out everything, and then foolishly we say, sure, sign me up, But I want to ask, and if you covered this before with George, I apologize, but when
yeah.
you decided to go the paranormal route, was that because it's just part of the legend now? And it was like, well, I might as well delve into this aspect of it. Was it really as simple as that?
Um yes and no.
Yeah.
So that paranormal aspect was attached to a mock trial, which I really wanted to do. So, in order to do the mock trial in the daytime, and there was an investigation at night, and they had the whole house, and I
Why not?
said, why not? But, but I did study some paranormal investigative type stuff, and it goes way back to the Bell Witch story in
Mm-hmm.
1817, when Andrew Jackson, he wasn't president yet, but he went to the house, and it had to do with John Bell, and years later he became ill and died. Mary Todd Lincoln, trying to talk to her dead son Willie in the White House.
Right.
You know, that was intriguing. So even back then, they believed in spirits, and that's there's something to be said about that with so many people, you know, telling their stories. But I have to say, those were great. You know, I loved. You know, those old stories where, you know, the candlelight and, you know, the Dickens classics and all that. But then when it started,
there's a certain romanticism about it. There really
right?
is.
Yeah, and but then after that, and I think it started maybe 2010. I don't know, but when the UFO shows and ghost hunters boomed into Sci-Fi Network, and then about 250, you know, shows. One of my favorites was Paranormal, the Paranormal Files Fact or Fake, when the team was an FBI agent, a lead scientist, a journalist.
Our buddy Ben.
Yeah, they wanted to debunk some of the myths. But, you know, and then they came out with, of course, the Ghostbusters, The Exorcist, a classic movie, The Sixth Sense, The Conjuring, of course, you've studied and been on, and Poltergeist. It just set it off. And that's when I kind of lost interest, because I understand, you know, there's money to be made, and I don't like that aspect of it. You know, I like the real aspect of it.
Right.
So
hopefully we're steering ourselves back to that. I know that, George, I know we're up against it here. So.
We are. We're overtime right now.
yeah.
But
Are we I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No. No.
Bill's got his finger on the trigger. That's really just why for you. So.
Got bills to pay.
Yeah, we want to thank you, Kimbra. Go ahead. You want to finish up?
Well, I wanted to thank you for inviting me. It was nice meeting you finally. I watch you all the time. I think you guys are celebrities, and I'm like, yeah, I get to be on the show. Yeah, it was fun.
We enjoyed the hell out of it too. And good luck with the writing again. And if anybody wants to find your book, where do they go?
Well, they can go to KIMBRAEBERLE.net. You know, everything. The book's right on the front page.
Fantastic.
So. Well, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books.
I'm in it, so buy it.
Ken is in it. He's in it. Yes, he is.
Oh, cheap plug.
And my friend did the artwork. And there's other murderous women with the skull bones and skulls and stuff. So it's
gorgeous.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate you as well.
Yeah,
I'll be in touch.
I'm going to give the information to you so you can reach out. All right.
Thank you guys all for watching. Patreon members, we'll see you tomorrow night at Town Hall. And Ken will be joining us from an undisclosed location.
Going back upstairs. I'm going ghost busting.
Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next time. Until then, have a good week. Thank you.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad, oh baby's hella bad. After her there ain't no coming back. Wanna take a run at that. I think she's feeling me, turn it up a few degrees. My imagination of her